Joined with us is Peter Muhumuza, who has been at this game for quite some time. He has the battle scars to prove his eloquence in terms of managing IT risk.
So every time you identify any risk anywhere, before you go into saying that you fix it, first take a record of that risk within your register of risks, which is called the risk register. That will create what we call a permanent record of basics that this is a critical risk, this is a high risk, this is a medium risk, or it is a low risk. Sometimes it can even be information. So that way, you will track when this occurred and when this has actually been remediated. Now, what is key for me is that I should look out for all criticals and highs and put them in a register together with the rest. But I prioritize closure, so it becomes very key to look at both the technical view, that they would like to achieve this with speed and robustness, but there should be minimum baselines for security that should be met at that point to avoid any risks from credentials that are going to suffer credential stuffing attacks.
Hello, everyone. Just curious to know how many people actually know what IT risk is, and why do actually organizations put in a lot of effort and put in a lot of money to hire people like Peter to do IT risk? I'm sure very few people have even heard of what IT risk is and how does it impact an organization. If you're curious about all that, in this episode, we'll be breaking down all that when it comes to IT risk. Joined with us is Peter Muhumuza, who has been at this game for quite some time. He has the battle scars to prove his eloquence in terms of managing IT risk. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you so much, my host. It's a pleasure to be with you, Deo.
Yes. For starters, Peter, this is the second time being hosted on the show, and it's always happy to have you on the show. Today, you're putting on You're welcome. Today, you're putting on a hat of an IT risk professional. So you started your career deep in technology, training, networks, systems, and engineering before moving into information security and risk. What did you have to unlearn when you realized that managing IT risk is not the same as fixing technical problems?
Well, thank you very much for such a wonderful question. I really get to pick the idea that I'm used to fixing it. So coming to risk, it's more advisory based on field knowledge that you've accumulated from the various, areas that you've had to do your work. Now you're advising someone else to actually follow your recommendation. One, you're referring to best practice, especially the policies that are already in place. If they are not in place, you're looking to actually develop those policies and then come to a point also where you're referring to already established standards for frameworks like NIST. You're looking at ISO for the different standards that are available, protection, information security, service management. Just to give even AI now as another point of reference. So you're advising from that point of view that this is how somebody ought to do this based on what I recommend for the scenario that we are picking. Yes.
Yeah, that's interesting. If someone is actually just hearing of IT risk for the first time, what is it actually?
So as every other profession, we do have areas where we have what is not normal. If I put it in a layman's language, what is not normal for a practice, like say networking or maybe cybersecurity. So you have those areas that are vulnerable, either they are prone to, if you do not fix the version that you're using, because Microsoft has advised you, it has been compromised by some other person, and you have the same version that has already been compromised. So they're asking you to update. And the risk is that if you do not update, you can easily be compromised like every other person that was already compromised. Then there are certain scenarios where it's not necessarily a compromise. It's just that if you implemented another fix to any known problem without having tested it, the risk is that you could break the production environment. Rather, it is encouraged that you test, for instance, what you're going to deploy in a production environment, and then you have the certainty. So risk that we are looking at here is the certainty that any action out of your technology practice will keep the environment running as expected. And then you have the test results to benchmark, either to support an approval process through change advisory, and then you get on to deploy as approved into a production environment. That is how you do risk management in a telecom or in a, say, an example, technology industry, anywhere.
Yeah, that's interesting. Could you elaborate more on telling us more about IT risk? When you look at a small IT risk, looked at small on a technical report, but could actually have a serious business impact. What made you spot this, and how did you get the right way of actually paying attention? Here we're looking at how best to spot specific IT risks and what should people actually pay more attention to.
Okay, so just circling back to what I'd said earlier, the basics that everyone moving, especially from a technology practice or any other field into risk management, you're not the one that is supposed to fix. So that needs to come in from a role point of view. You're an advisory role, and you're the one that checks that this advisory is meant to address the issue. Then you guide the people that are doing the practice itself to be able to deploy. Then you need to frame yourself in the mind that there should be zero risk. That is the end goal. So every time you identify any risk anywhere, before you go into saying that you fix it, first take a record of that risk within your register of risks, which is called the risk register. That will create what we call a permanent record of basics that this is a critical risk, this is a high risk, this is a medium risk, or it is a low risk. Sometimes can even be information. So that way, you will track when this occurred and when this has actually been remediated. And also, remediation is literally fixing. When the person has fixed that you've advised, then you take a record of the fact that they've been able to close that issue and mark it as closed. So if there's a recurrence of the same, then you still mark that this has resurfaced and then needs to be addressed. I'll give you an example. When you are dealing with, for instance, building computers, we have a standard where people build from, non-standard tested images. So they pick an image from the internet, either they have a Microsoft account, download and deploy. So the next person comes, they download and deploy a different version. So what we have here is that you find that the one that was deployed earlier lacks the current updates on it. So the risk is that we are having so many patches missing between the current version and the previous version. So in the case where you have such a scenario, it's best to always document and say, this is the most recently tested version. So then you plan to upgrade. So by planning to upgrade, so you currently have a risk of outdated versions of software that is running in your environment. So you record that as a risk. If you can't do it immediately, and then you plan to address it. So you put a timeline for which to address. Now, just going back again, we look at the many scenarios in the industry that we are very keen on. We have risks that come out because the business would like to deploy, for instance, a mobile app. And in the process of deploying the mobile app, they want it to go to the market before the other competitors. I'm talking about the financial technology industry. Before the other players in the industry have been able to deploy this particular technology. Now, what is key for me is that I should look out for all criticals and highs and put them in a register together with the rest. But I prioritize closure by the teams that are going to deploy of all criticals and highs. This is very key at that point in time. So even then, when we allow them to go to the market, say Christmas holidays coming, then they'll be able to know that we still have mediums and lows that are to be addressed because I've already put them in a register. Then also as a leader, we do understand that sometimes because of that speed, people will not prioritize credential integrity. They'll want to say, put everything in clear text and embed it within. So for me, as a risk analyst at that point, a risk specialist, a risk professional, I should come out to verify that even in the API that they're dealing with, we do have everything encrypted. We should not have clear text at any form. And that should be easy. And then if you're looking at maybe challenges of internet connectivity and all that sort of thing, we need to address that we have secure VPNs that are enhanced between, say, the third party and maybe a financial institution or any other institution, maybe a service provider that we're dealing with at that point. So it becomes very key to look at both the technical view that they would like to achieve this with speed and robustness, but they should be minimum baselines for security that should be met at that point to avoid any risks from credentials that are going to suffer a credential stuffing attacks. So that is very important for anyone to look out. And of course, for financial institutions, mobile money establishments, if there is any institutional loss, you have to report that to the central bank, for instance. Or if you have any form of attack, you need to inform the relevant authority, which is going to bring disrepute. So you must avoid those risks and know that some are direct, some are indirect, but the damage that comes is irreversible. It brings the reputation of the organization to a very great level that may not be easy to come out of. Thank you.
Yeah, that helps us now go to the next question, because I feel sometimes you find that you can't eliminate all the risks. So when you're sitting down with the business leaders, how do you actually decide what risk to accept and what needs treatment immediately, and what organizations simply cannot afford to accept?
Thank you very much. You bring a very key concern, and this key concern for me has a very clear route. We have identified that the level of severity of these risks is either critical, high, or low. So if our tolerance, we have to document. In that document, we need to bring up the business leaders within an organization, or maybe at this point, if there's already a regulation or there's a guideline, say from UCC, say from Bank of Uganda. I'm just giving those examples as frequently referred to. If even NITAU has come out, or NIRA in that case, they've come out and said, for you to establish connectivity between yourself and ourselves, you need to have these basic minimums in place. So the organization needs to come up with a risk appetite. Now, that risk appetite needs to be looked at from an enterprise point of view. Why? Because then you have tolerable risk, then you have risk that you cannot tolerate. So any risk that you cannot tolerate, therefore, will have to be addressed. You have to remediate that risk fully for you to be able to deliver a secure solution at that point. And when we speak of solutions, of course, we're saying that this solution is going out to the market. Now, we also have what we call insurance. So insurance comes in especially when you understand that this is technology that we cannot go away from. We need to, first of all, identify that the magnitude of a loss that may arise out of this risk materializing could be so high that it will drive our profits, in case we are hit with a data loss and customer credentials, customer data is lost out there. Fines can go up to a huge percentage of the profit that you've made for the year. So it is prudent that, first of all, against incidents, you do insurance from what you've seen in the industry. You do insurance based on the capabilities that the insurance will be able to take advantage of your ability to carry out, first of all, due diligence and due care in how you serve within the technology space. Certain basics have been already benchmarked for you to qualify, to acquire a higher level of insurance. One, if you align yourself with a standard like ISO 27001 or ISO 20000 or ISO 27701, we are looking at standards that are looking at data protection, even looking at capabilities now with AI, the ISO 42000. It becomes very easy for you to say, I'm already compliant with these standards. Either you're certified for some or you're compliant already, and you've carried out a gap assessment and identified the gaps and also put treatments for those gaps. So those gaps can be very simple. For instance, you're not able to patch an end-of-life system, say it's a critical firewall that you're using in your environment. So it becomes easy for you to say the impact of me upgrading this is that there is no more new updates that are being brought from the vendor. So you can pay for extended support from the vendor, and that will mitigate the risk of you not being able to get the real hardware support in case you have SmartNet for those who have Cisco, and other systems may have different sorts of support for hardware. So this hardware will be able to, take care of the fact that you can restore business very quickly, because this is the only single piece that you have of a software that you can restore to a hardware. So that is a very important point, especially where you have critical services. I'll give you an example. In telecom, we do understand that most clients will buy one single link from you, and yet their hardware, in case struck by lightning, is very important to restore. So you bring in concepts that you can tolerate a minimum amount of loss. You can also tolerate business downtime, and then you have that documented such that it's easy for you to give an allowance to restore services back to serve your clients. I think that's very important.
Yeah. Now, one of the biggest challenges we usually face is managing business risks with the IT risks. And in cases where you've talked about when businesses want to really move fast, deploy an application, the question of no fast wait is usually very hard for them to actually hear. They're like, you guys, IT guys have become a problem for us. How do you address such challenges?
Thank you very much. In a proper risk framework, you have to bring on board basic agreements between the leadership of the organization, because risk is enterprise-wide. It looks at the entire organization's structure. So you need to understand they are risks that you're going to accept. And then when you accept that risk, it means it is non-critical in essence when you're looking at the way it is done internally, right? The tools are there that you can use to isolate this particular issue. You can report. And then, like I mentioned earlier, in the risk register, you can even indicate some of the compensatory controls that, for instance, you've kept this device behind a firewall and that you have particular users that are authorized and probably they are going through a privileged access management system to access through a jump box, across a VPN and all that. So this makes it very easy. So the thing is that you're considering that it is of low impact for you, but it is also high cost for you to fix it. Like I gave the scenario of a firewall that is end of life and you need to spend a couple more millions for you to buy a replacement device. Now, you can accept that because it's one thing that you can recover from and it's easy to get a replacement. But we have those that must be treated immediately. Anything that causes high financial loss and any operational downtimes that exceed what you have allowed within your risk risk tolerance levels, that must be treated. If there is an operational cost that will cause many clients, for instance, on a mobile platform, let's say a USSD platform, where you're sending money across SWIFT in real time, if that is affected, for instance, that is something you must treat immediately. And what becomes very important at that point also for those that must be treated immediately is where you have personal identifying data or info. Personal identified info is very, very important that you deal with immediate effect. You must let the regulator know that there's been an exposure on data to this magnitude or as to a magnitude that you later establish. But the immediacy is to help you deal with the regulation. The regulation already stipulates how long you should actually report these. Then there are those that cannot be allowed. I'll give you an example. In the banking industry, we do have a limit, for instance, on how much you must have as capital, as liquidity position. So that is not negotiable. The central bank at that point has already established existential incidents also happen. For instance, where you find that the capital reserve minimum that's established by the central bank is being found to be below what the benchmark has been set out by the by the supervisory unit. So that is a very serious issue. So every bank looks at their liquidity, for instance, as a very strong asset. It's nothing that you can do to play around with it. You have to actually make it stronger as a position for that point in time. Then when it comes to licensing, that's a very important point for any technology organization. If your licensing is suspended, for instance, that can almost cost you business from the clientele and also from the regulators at that point. So it's very, very important to maintain validity of such stock within the risk portfolio. I think that is what we are looking at now. We can accept risk, we can treat risk, we can also consider risk unacceptable. So those are the areas of concern when we're looking at risk.
Thank you for that.
So just to take advantage of where we are, having challenges with business decisions without being a Mr. No is a very interesting scenario because one, when the goal of setting a risk framework is to permit the strategy of the organization to progress flawlessly, we usually facilitate and the reviews that validate that the goals that have been set out, for instance, to launch any digital channel at any point in time, literally to capture market share. And that is why we do the reviews to validate the goal. Then the other important factor of what we are looking at is where there are trade-offs. Trade-offs do facilitate that you can deploy multi-factor authentication, for instance, to address any administrator panels that have been established for especially clients to be able to log on successfully. And what you're avoiding there is frauds. Somebody should not impersonate another. So you're trusting that they have their phone and they're able to receive either an SMS or they're able to receive an OTP from an authentication app that is valid. And that validity is also addressed by the fact that your credentials are what you've used to log in. Now, quite a number of other options is we always look at where there is a lot of speed required, the level of exposure can be so high. So we usually want to go with any risks that are not able to be closed or to be remediated fully, get a formal sign-off. And that sign-off is one document that should go all the way to the leadership of the organization, the top leadership. And then where there is low exposure, at that point, you are dealing with compensatory controls. For instance, where you know that you can do authentication and you are using multi-factor, you can also go for utilization of tools that will protect a web-facing facility like Cloudflare. So they'll dissuade anyone that would like to break into your mobile or internet-facing. They will not break it easily because they have to break into Cloudflare first. And remember, Cloudflare has got very many guardrails that protect that web entity that you're launching out into the market as quickly as possible. So they act as your other eye. They'll let you know in case there's any alert to be addressed. And, they'll keep pushing to make sure that you meet the benchmarks of the minimum security to launch a secure solution on their platform. So you literally have quick time to get into the market. Then also importantly, when looking at the risk register, we have items that will be alive that you're monitoring. Then you have those that are key, but they're early warnings, to something that anything that is medium can quickly become a high. So you don't tend to shove it down the list. You also have to look at it at that point. And also, a low can become a medium at any point in time, or even a low can become a critical. So a risk register is very key to anyone that is entering at that point. Then routinely, it is important for someone to look at the key risks and the indicators thereof. So what we'll call a key risk indicator is documentation that is identifying what you're able to do. For instance, where you have staff that leave the organization, it's very important for you to address the factors that are important for you, especially the key staff. It is very important. It's very important for you not to make it a light item that I'll keep hiring other staff. So it's important that you always address the factors that cause this staff attrition rate to be high in an organization, because when they go, most of them will take field knowledge, they'll take client information, they'll work on the same databases to, if it is a portfolio that they are dealing with of clients. So risk management at that point comes to be that you're losing knowledgeable staff, especially where you have, for instance, a core banking system that is legacy. You have someone that has implemented this legacy core banking system and they've been able to train everybody that is working there. And they know slightly more than anybody else regarding that particular core banking system. So if you lose that staff, there's quite a lot of risk in trying to get a similar kind of support arrangement from the industry. Yes, so just completing that area where we are keeping risk registers, it's also important, especially to look back and say, okay, we have had certain risks in our organization, and some of them have brought about emergencies, and others, I'll give you an example. When you have a weak power banking system, or what we call a UPS, at that point, it's going to become a problem when the generator is delayed to start. The UPS should be able to hold for that period before the generator kicks in, and your main direct supply is down. So you don't want any outages that will cause your servers to improperly shut down, and then you have inconsistencies in data, and you're going to have to do a lot of recovery syncs and trying to do recoveries that are going to take so long, and also cause some systems to fail to restore to the point where you need no data loss. Yeah, so that is very important, especially in this market where we know that we're still a developing nation we still have power challenges, and sometimes it could be because we have overconsumption in one area compared to other areas. Thank you.
Yeah, that really becomes very tricky. But in the financial institutions, they're increasingly depending nature in terms of vendors, because we have so many vendors. We have cloud vendors, we have fintech partners, and other third parties. What is the biggest mistake organizations make when assessing third party IT risk? And what should they be asking before they trust another company with their services or sensitive data?
So one thing I have understood in the market is that it's important to carry out a third-party risk assessment at onboarding. So from a risk point of view, you're trying to understand, is this a registered entity in the area of which they are coming to operate? In our market, Uganda, we do have vendors that are global in nature, and they're working through partners. So you may carry out due diligence on the main party, that is, for instance, the OEM, but the support partner that they have locally does not have proper registration within the country, or maybe they do not have the requisite staff to support this partner because there's new technology that has come on board. I'll give you an example. Now we do have agentic AI. We have bots that we are bringing onto our websites to be able to serve our clients. You may not have a vendor that is conversant with this new technology. Find the OEM on the other side will say they'll support, but you need 24 support. Sometimes you need a man on the ground or boots on the ground. So it may be very difficult for you to understand that this technology that you're bringing on board will be supported fully. So while you've carried out the assessment on the OEM, you need to carry out another assessment on the third party so that you bundle the two together as part of your core service delivery package to your clientele eventually. Then part of the key things that you need to also focus on is that if they're already certified, for instance, I've given an example, SOC 2, you need to have a questionnaire that is submitted to them so that they give you an assurance. Now, this you do annually because that's what the regulation also looks out for, so that you don't maintain an old position, yet there's been a movement, there's been motion. Now, that way you're able to identify that, fine, my OEM is SOC 2, even the third-party agent here is also SOC 2. Maybe they're ISO certified, or maybe they're PCI DSS certified. So you look at the validity of these documents, and they are verifiable on the particular portals where, for instance, the certification is originating. And then that will be easier for you to know that this vendor has taken a level of depth to try and demonstrate their compliance to international or globally recognized standards. So that helps you as well to identify the other areas of your questionnaire. For instance, how do they handle client data? We have, for instance, cloud service providers. I'll give you an example of Amazon, Google, Microsoft with their Azure solutions. We do have clients that we service through these platforms. I do not know if they carry out business continuity. Do they test their sites in case one site is down? Do they fail over services? And there is documentation for that. So in my questionnaire, I may indicate that they give me the level of assurance on carrying out business continuity, disaster recovery, preparedness as a risk management framework that they have indicated that they do provide these services to us. I should be able to continue providing the same services to my clients without any hiccups. Or if there is any, it can be communicated, but it is minimized in the factors of assurance. Then also looking at the most important factor here is that even when there is unavoidable downtime, how long will it take, which is the recovery point objective, how long will it take and what amount of data loss shall we be able to be guaranteed by this third party? If somebody opts out of the services and they say, erase all my data, I don't want to be on your platform anymore, is it something that will happen across all the different data centers? Or you'll find, campaigns that are being sent out to this particular client on a service that we are offering because they were not removed from another component somewhere along the storage within the cloud that we have. That's just an example of what I could say in that regard.
Now, if you're looking at compliance as a whole, and several, there's There's the ISO, there's the different standards and frameworks which people actually use. And there's also the SISM, there's the ISO 27001, there's the ITIL, and basically security governance. So one biggest challenge is people confuse compliance with risk management. And according to you, what does good IT risk management look like after audit is over?
So in my view, just trying to understand, risk is literally looking out for basics. Does an organization perform audits? And if they do perform audits, that is a tick. But when the issues have been identified, are they closed duly and timely? That is very key. So in other words, you're looking at protecting the capital, of an organization. But you need to have addressed the high and critical issues within the audits that have been identified, or within the management frameworks, let's say vulnerability management, patch management. Those need to be some of the basics for a technology organization or a digital transformation journey that any organization is looking to address. So the other thing that we're looking at is, one, where we have resources, they need to work within a minimum set of standards. We've talked about ISO, and it sets out, all the clauses from 4 to 10 that are also excluding the annex controls that need to be complied with. These are some of the things that are later going to be reviewed at the end of the year, and they're tracking, corrective actions that are based on the plan that you provided within the previous audit. So it's very important to see that the culture is continuing, where you have a standard, like we've talked SOC 2, we've talked about NIST, or any of these, that standard has been set up to be followed regularly. So you could have, continuous improvement based on the fact that you've maintained closure of what was identified before, but then you continue to work on any other areas that are identified that require to be addressed. Now, this can be routine. You have documentation to show the same. And then realistically, this is what the personnel that you have within an organization are following, to indicate that there is a sort of a culture to maintain compliance. Then we also have, red team assessments. Those are some of the areas where, we bring in the best hackers at the moment to try and break into your organization from outside and also from inside. Where you have a very good rating of fewer issues being determined every other year, that's a positive trend. Then you have, maturity assessment. This is very, very important, especially where you are developing a strategy, either a risk strategy or a business strategy for technology. It's always imperative that you carry out a maturity assessment. This assessment will identify you based on the peers globally, not just within Uganda. So what this will identify is where you're weakest, where you're strongest, and what you need to do within those areas to improve and even excel over what the global benchmarks have been. So that is one of those very important areas that can help guide an organization, both in terms of compliance. If you're looking at it, let's say data privacy, cybersecurity, you're looking at, AI governance, all these can be measured in terms of compliance. But the risks thereof are those areas that need to be corrected, and then you track when they're going to be closed in terms of timelines. Thank you.
Thank you for that. As you're winding down, if you're looking at a few areas that, in terms of technology and risks, that worries people the most, or we should be worried about, be AI cyber attacks, it could be legacy systems, or cloud concentrations, or digital transformation, or something else. What is that thing that people should be worried about, and why are people actually underestimating it right now?
Okay. I've come to understand a very interesting bit, especially the fact that we have moved to the cloud. My phone, your phone, everyone's phone has enough memory when you purchase it. But as we go along, what you receive on your socials, what you record, what you save will fill up, that free storage that is granted to you. Yes? Because everything is actually being backed up into the cloud. We like this because it simulates easy flow in case you're getting another device. You have your data ready on hand. It will immediately be populated into your purview. And what happens is that we have created cloud concentration across the various spheres. It's not just email communication anymore. We're using solutions like Office 365, using Google Azure. These services are required at all units of our facets of operation. Now, where you have that third party, you and them are totally interdependent. You cannot work without that third party at any point in time. Why? Because every time you're deploying a solution, it's being deployed on a server that you're spinning very quickly, and it's coming up and you're able to deliver services. I'll give you an example. Middleware that we're using for, cyber awareness solutions is a cloud solution. Many other organizations use cloud solutions for awareness from Microsoft, for instance. But at this point, we are really stuck in there. Fintechs, for instance, for them to be able to make money, to remain with high uptimes, stability, you are safer. You're more secure being in the cloud. It's cheaper. It's easier to, get, scalability at that point in time. So it's an infrastructure backbone that we cannot go away with without utilizing. Then the other important part is that there is a misunderstanding. Artificial intelligence is a subset of cybersecurity. And the risks emanating from AI or artificial intelligence, therefore, are risks to be addressed within a cybersecurity or information security point of view. Because what are we dealing with? It's big data, apparently. But just one of the risks that you have, you're not paying for that AI solution. It will not remember what you taught it yesterday. And when you try to regenerate the same content, in as much as it is good, you realize that at the end of the day, that the risk was and still remains that you, the person, are still required to do your job. You're still required to do exactly the due care in the documentation that you're going to provide to this regulator. It should be validated against the facts within the organization, the dates when it was done, what exactly was done, was it approved? That artificial intelligence will not know this. And this is one of the risks that we're dealing with. So in as much as we are going into interdependence, we will not move away from the human being, not in the recent days has it happened, and not in the short-term future. I think we're still far off from having an app, develop a mobile app for you, and you're clear that it is secure. You can go ahead and deploy it without having a pen tester to validate that it is unbreakable. You need to have your payment gateway revalidated by a human being, not by an AI bot. You see, that is a very important risk, and it's a very strict operational framework because you need to have all the approvals, first of all. And the AI will not approve. It will go ahead and create for you and leave you to make the decisions to deploy or not to deploy. Whether it is compliant or not compliant, those compliance checks have to be done by an individual, by a human being, and a risk register needs to come out of that particular platform. Why? Because you have had it being done by AI, you do not have the source code, and you may not be able to correct it. Remember, some of the free or open source AIs will not remember what you have taught them today. You have to retrain them every other day to get the same accurate results. So that is it that I had to say about that. Thank you. Were you able to hear me?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Peter. I was saying stuff, but I muted myself.
Okay.
Thank you for coming on the show once again. It's been a good time, especially learning how IT risk affects us and how beneficial it is to actually make sure that one, vet each and everything, patch frequently, set up all the mitigation controls, and work with the business the best way we can as IT. As we are winding down, let the people know what you're doing and where can. As you're doing that parting shot, you could also tell a young professional out there, if they are to begin this journey of IT risk in the next 90 days, what are those things or skills that they should learn or technologies to, become the next Peter Muhumuza?
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Deo. I currently am with KCB Uganda in the area of IT risk and security management. I'm available on LinkedIn. I'm very responsive on LinkedIn, and I'll respond to you as much as possible. My email address may be slower than it is with LinkedIn. I feel it's a better platform. It's much safer, and it exposes us very much. So what would somebody do to transition to IT risk from technical capabilities that you right now we working with? As a technician, you're used to being the one that does, like I said, you need to acquaint yourself, first of all, what business risk is all about. We are looking at how you convert any technical challenges into seeing how much money may be lost in terms of money exposure. You're also looking at how much downtime operationally there will be. You also are looking to understand, are there any regulatory impacts? I know of scenarios where you get fines under the Bank of Uganda guidelines, and those are communicated prior. So when you go to the Bank of Uganda website, you look out for the guidelines that have been provided. Now, based on those guidelines, you can derive what we call gap assessments within your organization. You say this guideline says X, Y, and Z. This is how we are currently operating. Therefore, we are below par or we are meeting this particular guideline. So if you know that you're not meeting, put a timeline or inquire from within the team by engaging, and that is one of those ways. Now that you can do within 30 days, it's not very difficult to learn business impact translation. Whenever you look at anything, you translate that flow, any technical flow, into monetary exposure, operational downtime, regulatory impact. Those are some of the areas that you're playing with. Then we're looking at within 30 days to 60 days. You need to be able to understand what business looks like, which is not what you do in IT. Sit with people in credit, treasury, operations, channels, for those who are in banking, right? So that you understand how you can map from your end to their end. What is value to them, which is what we call the value chain. So you understand where is the money actually made or lost in what credit is doing, in what treasury is doing. If you're in a fintech, that may not be a space that you're able to see. So you need to interact with peers in organizations like that. They may not have to reveal particular data that is from the spheres that are sensitive at that point in time. But you get to understand, how do banks make money in treasury? How do they make money in credit, in operations? Then when you come to understand yourself in that regular interaction, it becomes easy for you to look and recall, okay, this is the scenario that has happened in credit, in treasury, in operations, or even in IT. And this is how it would be treated like, okay? Looking at 60 to 90 days, literally, you need to practice risk as what would I call it? As a quantity. You need to practice as a quantity. One of the ways you can learn it very well is you look at heat maps, which are bringing out the quality or the quantitative matters. Quality, we're looking at, is it a high, is it a medium, is it a low? Quantity, we're looking at what penalty are we likely to face in case data is lost and we do not report to the regulator. So those are some of the concerns that we are looking at. And then, of course, we have frameworks that can teach you what I'm saying. So if you're looking, particularly, you can learn what they call FAIR, FAIR, FAIR framework. So that is one of those. But there's also a lot of lessons that you can acquire on Udemy, on many other platforms. Cybrary, there are very many platforms. There are very many platforms. And also, you can pay for some of these certifications. I'll give you an example. Many people have gone into ISACA and they've started with CISA. Later on, if you've been in tech for a while, you could go into CISM, you could go into CISSP. Those are some of the areas where they bring out some ways of quantifying risk, but you can also go for risk-specific courses. Now, you'll be amazed. Here you're dealing with governance. So you look at policy and how to comply with policy, and then you come up, as you get to know the policies, it becomes easier with you comprehending how to quantify risk. Either is it qualitatively high or qualitatively low? Those are some of the areas that you'll be able to acquaint yourself, but also look for a buddy. There are areas where you always need a buddy. So the buddy is me on LinkedIn, and quite several number of us on LinkedIn. We are usually very cooperative, and we'll also avail sessions where you can visit me outside working hours and we can give each other time and we discuss more often as a mentorship journey as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you all for coming on the show, and wish you all the best. Thanks.